Dan Lanning passed a big test against Ohio State. He's got a different sort of test against Purdue later tonight.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks, which is why if you have not already, please like, comment, subscribe, rate, review wherever you listen to or watch this show, which today is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. 3 keys on the road against Purdue. Is Dante Moore going to play in this game? And some questions to answer looking forward, but I'll have a reaction show up later tonight as Oregon takes on Purdue. Don't forget, this is a Friday night game for the second time in the last 3 weeks. The last one went pretty well. Oregon had a 21-0 lead against Michigan State at the half. I think this one's going to feel very similar, but I mentioned that this is a different sort of test for Dan Lanning. English is hard. Dan Lanning. I swear I remember the name of Oregon's head coach. Last week was, can you get your team up for the big game? Can you have your team prepared? Can you out-coach the other sideline, which he did? Can you have that marquee signature victory? He got that. This week against Purdue, it's a different sort of test. It's not as severe. You can argue it's not as challenging, but it is absolutely different than the test he was facing last week. Because the test in this game against Purdue, for Dan Lanning specifically, and this applies to the rest of the coaching staff, this applies to the players, but it applies to the head coach more than anybody else. Can you have your team avoid the October peak? We have seen teams, Tennessee 2 years ago comes to mind here, play really good football, have a big win. And that win they had against Alabama in the third Saturday in October of 2022 was huge. It propelled them to the number 1 ranking in the country. Oregon's number 2 at the moment. That Tennessee team did not make the playoff. They peaked. And you see this in sports all the time. The Phillies were the best team in baseball for large stretches of the year. They peaked during the regular season. Couldn't put it together in the postseason. That's what Dan Lanning has to accomplish here. And when I was watching Ducks versus them for about the 6th time from that Ohio State recap, it's just phenomenally well done as always. Make sure you watch the bonus content as well. Super cool story. Super. I mean, just chef's kiss of great stories and why Autzen Stadium is such a wonderfully special place for everybody. But when I was watching it, there's the scene where Dan Lanning gets up in the post-game locker room. Everybody's buzzing. He takes the shirt off. He holds up the FIBU shirt. And then he starts talking to the team. And he talks about how proud he is, what a big win it is. And then he says he wants them to keep improving. He says he wants them to look forward, that nobody stops improving in October. That's what you have the opportunity to showcase here against Purdue. That wasn't just a message that came to you in the post-game locker room when you had at least half of an idea that the cameras are rolling. As someone who's been in that sort of locker room environment, I can tell you football coaches are not different from what you see in there. That is 100% how they act all the time. But if Oregon goes to Purdue and comes out sluggish, it's not a huge indictment, but it's definitely not passing the test. Because the idea going into this game for me is I want to see Oregon play to its standard after the Ohio State game. I saw them do it in the first 3 games before they played the Buckeyes. I saw them blast Oregon State, and the offense wasn't stopped other than kneel downs in the end of the quarter. I saw the defense not allow a touchdown against UCLA. I saw them blank Michigan State, move the ball at will, and just have some turnover issues, which they then cleaned up, and by they I mean Dylan Gabriel, of course, in the red zone area. Like, I saw all of that happen, so I know that they can do it. I know they can play to that sort of level against inferior opponents, which Purdue absolutely is. But I haven't seen them do it yet against Ohio State. So you have to find a way. You have to push the right buttons. You have to get your team in the right mindset, and that's a challenge. And it's not something that Dan Lanning has had to deal with before. This is the first time that he's won a game of this magnitude and has to now recenter his team's focus to, hey, we have an opponent on the other side. Maybe you go to the two times that Oregon's played them in the modern era, 2008, 2009, combined margin of victory for the Ducks in those games, 5 points. They won by 2, they won by 3. Or maybe you go to the 2018 Ohio State team, for instance, that was highly ranked and went to West Lafayette and lost. Or any of the other, there are a myriad of teams, I think, that have gone into this stadium against this program and lost. They have great support. They're 1-5, so I don't know what that environment's going to be like. But for Oregon, shouldn't matter. Should not matter. And I'm not going to go full on sound the alarm, blow the sirens. Ohio State was a fluke. The team can't do, if this game is close or closer than it should be. But certainly it'll be, don't take a feather out of the cap, but maybe shorten the feather a little bit for the team and get them to understand. Like, it could end up being a good thing to get them to realize, hey, you're not just going to coast. And everybody else has got good players too. And you're going to face good teams the rest of the season. I got a lot of questions about that after the Ohio State game, and I'll probably get to those a little bit on the reaction show a bit more. But a lot of people wonder, what's the toughest game that Oregon has left? Well, they shouldn't be thinking about that. We of course, can. That's why I exist in this particular space for this job. That's why you are all asking the questions. But for the Ducks players, you got a short week, you got long travel, and you've got the emotional letdown factor right in front of your face. Got to find a way to stay away from that. And teams fall victim to it all the time. We know Kalen DeBoer is a great coach. His team fell victim to it and lost outright. They're not out of the playoff or the national championship picture. They still hold their own cards. They still control their own destiny to get into the playoff and such. But I don't think Oregon can lose this football game unless they play truly awful. But even then, Purdue has really struggled this year. Purdue has really, really struggled, and I'll get to that more when I talk about my keys to the game. But the biggest thing that I am looking for is Oregon's head coach, and not the in-game decisions that he makes, or whether he's got some trick plays available, or whether Oregon is good situationally. Do they come out ready to play in the first half, or do they slugfest their way to a 13-7 lead at the break, and then they wake up in the second and go on a 28-0 run? Oregon has every single ability necessary, every single position group, every player that's available in this game. They've got all the potential in the world to go on a run the way they did against UCLA. And remember, that game was it 28-3? It was 28-3. Oregon's driving down the field. Dylan Gabriel throws a pick six. That's what this game should look like. Oregon should be able to go into the half, have around 30 points, have given up less than 10, and then take your foot off the gas, hand the ball off, get back home, and get out of the game healthy. That's what should happen, and that's what I'll be looking for against the Boilermakers later tonight. Let me know your thoughts in the YouTube comments or hit me up on X, formerly known as Twitter. 3 keys to the game. Not 1, not 2, but 3. Starting with that man, Jordan James. You got to get him going, and that's coming up next. Guys, ever feel like you need a little boost in the bedroom? It's time you stop worrying about your performance and get Hims so you can feel confident knowing that you will be at your best when you need to be. The process is 100% online, so there's no need for uncomfortable doctor's visits, and Hims is changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. No insurance is needed either, and one low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. So, you just need to go to HIMS.com and start your free online visit today. HIMS.com/lockedon. That's the place to go. That's HIMS.com/lockedon for your personalized ED treatment options. HIMS.com/lockedon. The products mentioned are chewable compounded products which are not approved by or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a health care provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan. Check them out at hims.com/lockedon. All right, 3 keys to getting the sort of win against Purdue we'd all like following the Ohio State landmark victory. And I have watched the Ducks versus them as many times as you have, I imagine. I imagine everybody's watched it a good amount. It still feels very recent because of that. But another game's here, and as exciting as that game was, Oregon's got to be able to look forward. So 3 keys to the game. First, I want to shout out Sabrina Ionescu. Game 3 dagger, top of the arc in the WNBA Finals. That was pretty sweet. She's just a stud, and she would have won a national championship if not for COVID. So, key number 1 for Oregon, establish the ground game. Purdue allows 228 rushing yards per game. This is an opportunity for Oregon's rushing attack to really pop off, to have an Oregon State level game where you're well over 200 on the ground. They were 7.5 yards per carry in that game. Purdue last week against Illinois struggled defending on the perimeter. Jordan James hasn't been a super side-to-side runner. He's a downhill sort of guy primarily. I wonder if you see a little more Kenyon Sadiq in some fly sweep pop pass actions, or get it to Tez Johnson or Trayshawn Holden. I wonder if a reverse doesn't come around. I don't know if Trayshawn Holden's going to play, but Oregon give an end around to a number of different guys, including but not limited to Kenyon Sadiq. So I think establishing the ground game here is important for 2 reasons. Number 1, if you can just line up and run the football, good way to move it, good way to get the clock down and force Purdue to execute consistently, not give them a bunch of drives, not give them a bunch of opportunities, dominate time of possession here. But secondly, when Oregon's running the football incredibly well, I wouldn't say the play action is a huge function of their offense, but certainly it's a component. And at the very least, if you're worried about the ground game, you can take those one-on-one shots on the outside. We saw how that went last week for Ohio State secondary. And Purdue's secondary is just straight up not on that level. They are not particularly close. So far this season, they're allowing about 225 passing yards per game, so they're actually a little bit better there. But still, are you facing the caliber of athlete against the Boilermakers that you are against Ohio State? No. So if Oregon can run the football, then Purdue has no chance of stopping the Ducks. And I don't know if they do anyway. Like, the way the Oregon offense played last week was probably its best individual game of the year. Because when you factor in the stakes, you factor in the competition they were going up against, that Jordan James was over 100 yards rushing and Dylan Gabriel was not sacked. It might be another 0 in the sack department for this Oregon team. But Purdue so far this season has been pretty good getting sacks to their opponents. They're averaging over 2 a game so far. They've compiled 14. They've also allowed 15. So offensive line might have some problems with the way this defensive line for Oregon is playing at the moment. But I think if Oregon establishes the ground game, that ensures Purdue's just not going to be able to stop Oregon. And I don't think they can score enough points to keep up, even though they put up a season-high 49 last week in the win against Illinois. They had 3 at the half. It was not... there was a lot of chaos. There was a defensive score. Like, Illinois kind of imploded. Purdue definitely made some plays, and the offense looks a lot better with Ryan Brown at quarterback compared to Hudson Card, who's out with in concussion protocol. But yeah, I think if Oregon runs football, they're going to be just fine. Key number 2, make Ryan Brown throw the ball. So Corey sent in this question that factors into this key. He said, "Hey Spencer, just wanted to point out Chip has yet to beat Oregon while coaching at another school." Fact check true. "Thoughts on Oregon facing a starting freshman quarterback at Purdue this Friday? Sounds like Birch will be out again. He will be in all likelihood, but seems like the defense just needs to rattle him early. Haven't seen his film yet or don't know much about Purdue's offensive line. Thoughts? Go Ducks." I'd be lying if I said I've watched a ton of Purdue football just because they've been so bad this year. They have not beaten an FBS opponent. Their only win of the season came in their week 1 game against Indiana State, alma mater of Larry Bird. Go Sycamores. But I don't think that Purdue has demonstrated they can play the sort of football that they put on display last week in the second half in Champaign consistently. So I don't have a lot of confidence that they're going to be able to just do that against this Oregon team that's played at a really high level this year. And remember, Dan Lanning has never lost, knock on wood, to an unranked opponent in his coaching career. I don't anticipate that changing this week, even though, as I've talked about, the emotional letdown trap game duality that exists is very real. If Oregon fans out there, if you're concerned about that or have thought about it, I'm not blaming you. Everything's there. Big win against Ohio State, short week, long travel. Purdue can be a tough place to play. I don't know what their fans are going to be like because they are just struggling so much this year. But for Ryan Brown, he can make plays with his legs. And that's why I say key number 2 is make Ryan Brown throw the ball. Last week, he certainly made some throws. If you go watch the highlights of those throws, not a lot of tight window situations. This is a guy who is starting his second career college football game. I think Illinois got a pretty solid football team. I'm going to go out on a limb and say their defensive line is not as talented as Oregon. Rush lane integrity is going to be huge. Make him kill you from the pocket. Force these Purdue wide receivers to go one-on-one with the Oregon defensive backs. I like Oregon's defense in that sort of situation, but what you don't want to do is allow him to settle in by letting him break contain. So I think you'll see a good number of quarterback spies from the Oregon linebackers in this game. Jeffrey Boss has done that a lot over the years. Certainly Devin Jackson's a guy who's capable with his athletic traits. He had a great game against Ohio State, by the way, made a couple of really nice plays, but I think Oregon has to be able to keep him in the pocket and say, go ahead, read the defense, slice and dice, try to make throws outside the numbers. And if he does that, tip your cap and say, all right, that's a heck of a play. Nice job, young freshman. You got a bright future. But I don't think that he's going to be ready to do that with the way this Oregon defense has played this season. Remember, against Michigan State, starters did not allow a touchdown. UCLA starters did not allow a touchdown, just a pick six. Purdue's offense this year, I know they had a big game last week, under 24 points a game. Now they've made a change at offensive coordinator. The first game, and I believe Hudson Card was the one who played against Wisconsin, they put up 3 points. 3 points. That was on the road, but that was game 1 with the new offensive coordinator, 6. They put up 6 points at Wisconsin, and they lost the game 52-6. If Oregon plays the way they're capable, yeah, that's what this game should end up looking like. And Hudson Card did play in that game and only threw for 111 yards. So, they might be upgrading a little bit with Ryan Brown coming in as a young freshman who's playing with kind of nothing to lose here. But he's auditioning to be Purdue's quarterback of the future. And, I mean, one game in, looks good so far. This Oregon defense is a much different test. So make him throw the ball, keep him in the pocket. Key number 3, take the crowd out of it. What do you remember about those Purdue upsets that we've seen over the years? The last one I think was against Ohio State, but other really good teams have gone down in West Lafayette as well. What do you remember? Like I think Iowa has maybe lost. I could look into it further, but it's well known. You ask anybody amongst Big Ten circles, like, hey, weird things can happen in there. Crazy things can transpire. Yep, they can. Why? Great crowd. Great crowd. Take them out of it. Jump on Purdue early. Don't give them any semblance of hope like Black Widow gave to Hawkeye in Avengers Endgame. Don't give them that. Just make them feel like the sad, lonely Vandy fan against Alabama from years ago when they were down like 52-0 in the third quarter or something like that. Like, that's what you need to do to the crowd. Eliminate them as a factor. Don't let them get that inkling of, oh, could we be doing this again? Hey, I've seen this program do it before. Jump on them early, have a 14-3 lead at the end of the first quarter, and then go from there. If Oregon does that, I don't think Purdue's got the dogs on both sides to overcome a double-digit deficit, even at home. Those are the keys. You get that done, boom. Oregon will win big. Are we going to see Dante Moore in this game? I would like to. It would be great. I'm always a fan in these sorts of games when I expect Oregon to win big of A, getting your starters out of there to avoid injury, and B, giving young guys an opportunity in a real Power 4 road environment to get in there and run the offense. And I'd say 60-40, we at least see Dante Moore at some point in this game. I don't know if there's an exact line or margin, But I would love to see Dante Moore or Austin Novosad get in the game and do more than just hand the ball off. Now, that's mostly a selfish thing on our part. Like if, Oregon is up by 30 points and there's 3 minutes left and they have the ball, yeah, you're probably just going to hand the ball off a couple times. But would we all like to see what those guys look like running the offense against somebody that's not Oregon's defense in the spring game? Yeah. Yeah, of course. Of course you would. So I think there's a solid chance if Oregon plays the way that they are capable of and follows the aforementioned keys to the game, yeah, Dante Moore gets into this one. And I think that'd be great. Can I guarantee that? Of course not. It's college football. It's played on the field, not on paper. But that's why it's fun. But you sent me some questions. Lots of questions. Lots and lots of questions. I'm not going to get to all of them, but I'm going to get to some of them. What's the identity of this Oregon team? We're going to have more information on that later tonight. I'm going to have an answer for you anyway, coming up next. First, let's talk about FanDuel. NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And if you would like to bet Oregon against Purdue, guess what? You can do that. I'm going to double check the line right now. It might have moved, might have shifted. Oregon is going to be, wait for it, a big favorite. Why 28.5 points? Yeah, the money line's minus 7,000. I don't know if there's money to be made there, but over 60.5, under 60.5. What do you think? I lean towards the under there because I think this Oregon defense is going to show up in a big way as they did against Michigan State, as they did against UCLA. So if you're keeping the opponent under 17 points, well, suddenly they've just got to keep you under 45. Oregon could go in and put up 50 points on their own. Notre Dame beat them 66-7. Whatever you're feeling, check them out at FanDuel.com. Are you confident one way? Are you not confident in yourself? You bet however you like. However you do it, just do it at FanDuel.com. All right, I've got a bunch of questions in the mailbag, which I love. Love hearing your guys' questions. Keep them coming. YouTube comments, X, formerly known as Twitter. If you want priority access, go become a Locked On Ducks Insider. Link in the description below where you can get a free 14-day trial. You get priority access to the mailbag. You get all sorts of other perks as well. I check that a lot more often than I check social media. And you can oftentimes talk with me during the game on a regular basis. So Monica sends in this question. Spencer, there's a lot of chatter from Ohio State fans and pods stating Oregon is not a running team. How would you characterize our team? We'll have another data point tonight. We are, however, 6 games in, and I think this Oregon team is whatever it needs to be. And that's a great thing. If they want to lean on the run, they can do that. They know how to move the ball down the field and only throw 2 passes. If they want to control the clock a little, well, I feel like they could do that too. Do they have an intermediate passing game? Yeah. Do they have a short passing game? Obviously. Can they push it down the field? Yeah, if you can do that against Ohio State, you can do that against anybody. We'll flip over to the defensive side. Where is the glaring weakness? I've got a veteran and all-conference linebacker in Jeff Bossa leading other talented young guys like Devin Jackson or veterans like Bryce Betcher who have been wildly productive so far this year, along with Justin Jacobs. The defensive line, I said before the year, is the best Oregon's had since 2014. Yeah, they're living up to the billing. Derek Harmon is a stud. I don't know where he's getting drafted, but it's probably going to be pretty darn high, especially after the season he's having right now. And the secondary, not perfect, but making plays. Not doing a poor job, per se. Not being able to consistently cover Ohio State's receivers. That's not exactly a blemish on your resume there. So I wouldn't describe Oregon as a running team. I wouldn't describe them as a passing team. I wouldn't describe them as a defensively led team or an offensively led. I think they're a tremendously balanced unit. We can agree that, aside from the onside kick, sort of, against Ohio State, they're not a special teams led team, but how would I describe Oregon? They're an incredibly balanced, versatile football team, and I think that's a big reason why they're 6-0. A couple questions here from Blazer Duck. Spencer, could you take a moment and talk about the dominant performance of the Ducks defense, holding Ohio State to just 10 points in the second half, but specifically only 3 points in the fourth quarter on 3 separate Ohio State drives? I think Shout had something to do with it. Thanks, Spencer. I don't know if shout specifically had anything to do with it, other than it sure does put the crowd in a great mood. And when the crowd is riled up, turns out Ohio State fans are doing this again. For those listening on audio, I'm plugging my ears because there were a lot of issues caused by the crowd in that game. Communication issues, pre-snap penalties for Ohio State. I love the way the defense has played this year. Absolutely love it. And remember, don't forget, Ohio State had 7 points in that game they never should have had. Because as anyone with two eyes can see, even if Joel Klatt doesn't mention it, Jeffrey Bossa intercepted the ball. And that led to Ohio State's first touchdown. So, yeah. I've been bullish on the defense all year. Love the way they played against Ohio State. 31's not the greatest number in the world. But against that Ohio State offense, it was enough. And they made plays when they needed to. And they were able to get pressure. They took away the rushing attack. I think they did an outstanding job. And the second half adjustments against a guy in Chip Kelly, who we know very well, is a maestro of second half adjustments offensively, makes it all the more impressive. Blazer Duck also asked, Spencer, after you recorded your reaction to Oregon beating Ohio State, how'd you celebrate the win? Did you sleep? I did sleep. Not much, but I did sleep. I actually got up the next day and went to a PGA Tour event in Utah, the first held in the Beehive State since 1967. And we left at 7:30 in the morning to get down there and spend the day at Black Desert. It was really cool. Went with a couple friends. And, I overslept my alarm by an hour. So I slept. Not much, but it was so worth it. In the Sticks with Knicks, nice name, asks, question today is about the Denver Broncos, who, as I'm recording the show, thumped the Saints in New Orleans. Now, Spencer Rattler was starting, but hey, Troy Franklin, I think, was the leading receiver in that one for the Broncos. In the last game, both threw a touchdown to Troy. Alex Forsyth is the center and was the center for the Ducks in 2022. Is this the first time all three players who touched the ball for an NFL touchdown had done the same in college? I don't know about all time. That is an incredibly sicko-specific stat in the NFL. Someone probably has it somewhere. I do not. But it is the first time that I can remember it has been ball is snapped from duck to duck and thrown to duck. And all those guys were on that 2022 team. Pretty awesome. It's a pretty awesome thing. Alex Forsyth, Wesleyan legend in the great state of Oregon. And Troy Franklin, not surprised, he's starting to find his stride a little bit and become a more productive member of that Broncos offense. And Bo Nix, he's not lighting the world on fire with his numbers, but he's winning games. He's 4-1 in his last 5 starts, and his only loss is 2. Wait for it, our guy Justin Herbert. So, Oregon quarterback succeeding in the NFL. Who could have foreseen? Us. We could have foreseen. Mallard Copter asks, to wrap up today's show, question for you, Spencer. After Dan's 12-man formation call, could the crowd of Autzen Stadium be considered the 13th man? If so, we need T-shirts. I don't know if they were serious, but the Twitter account Puddles, who's hilarious, he is very, very funny, sent out on Twitter, there were shirts about the 12th man. If those are real, I might be buying one. If they're not, someone should make one. Should they be the 13th man? Well, if someone makes a shirt with a 13th man joke on it, what needs to be included is that it forced a rule change. Like, I'm not a t-shirt designer, but Oregon, the smartest 13th man in all of college football. Something like that. I don't know. Get creative with that in the YouTube comments. How would you incorporate that onto a t-shirt? I don't have a creative instinct in my body if I'm not talking about sports. Luckily, that's what you all come here for. Thanks for making this your first listen. Go make Locked On College Football your second or view on YouTube. I keep you updated with the biggest stories in this, the greatest sport on planet Earth, every day, all year round. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.